This video is the first part of our SAP C02 series. To get notified about the future parts, please make sure to subscribe the channel and press the bell icon. To the questions. Question 1. A company built an application based on AWS Lambda deployed in an AWS Cloud Formation stack. The last production release of the web application introduced an issue that resulted in an outage lasting several minutes. A solutions architect must adjust the deployment process to support a canary release. Which solution will meet these requirements? The correct option is A. Create an alias for every new deployed version of the Lambda function. Use the AWS CLI update alias command with the routing config parameter to distribute the load. Option A is the correct answer as it meets the requirement of supporting a canary release. Question 2. A company has a monolithic application that is critical to the company's business. The company hosts the application on an Amazon EC2 instance that runs Amazon Linux 2. The company's application team receives a directive from the legal department to backup data from the instance's encrypted Amazon Elastic Block Store volume to an Amazon S3 bucket. The application team does not have the administrative SSH key pair for the instance. The application must continue to serve the users. Which solution will meet these requirements? The correct option is A. Attach a role to the instance with permissions to write to Amazon S3. Use the AWS Systems Manager Session Manager option to gain access to the instance and run commands to copy data into Amazon S3. AWS recommended to stop EC2 instances to create root volume snapshot. When you create a snapshot for an EBS volume that serves as a root device, we recommend that you stop the instance before taking the snapshot. Question 3. A company runs a new application as a static website in Amazon S3. The company has deployed the application to a production AWS account and uses Amazon CloudFront to deliver the website. The website calls an Amazon API gateway REST API. An AWS Lambda function backs each API method. The company wants to create a CSV report every 2 weeks to show each API Lambda function's recommended configured memory, recommended cost, and the price difference between current configurations and the recommendations. The company will store the reports in an S3 bucket. Which solution will meet these requirements with the least development time? The correct option is B. Opt-in to AWS Compute Optimizer. Create a Lambda function that calls the export Lambda function recommendations operation. Export the .csv file to an S3 bucket. Create an Amazon event bridge rule to schedule the Lambda function to run every 2 weeks. The correct answer is B. Opting in to AWS Compute Optimizer and creating a Lambda function that calls the export Lambda function recommendations operation is the least development time solution. This option allows you to use the built-in AWS Compute Optimizer service to extract matrix data and export it as a CSV file, which can then be stored in an S3 bucket. Question 4. Our solutions architect has developed a web application that uses an Amazon API gateway, regional endpoint, and an AWS Lambda function. The consumers of the web application are all close to the AWS region where the application will be deployed. The Lambda function only queries on Amazon Aurora MySQL database. The solutions architect has configured the database to have 3 read replicas. During testing, the application does not meet performance requirements. Under high load, the application opens a large number of database connections. The solutions architect must improve the application's performance. Which actions should the solutions architect take to meet these requirements? The correct options are B and D, that is, use RDS proxy to set up a connection pool to the reader endpoint of the Aurora database and move the code for opening the database connection in the Lambda function outside of the event handler. The correct answer is B and D. About the option B, using RDX proxy to set up a connection pool to the reader endpoint of the Aurora database can help improve the performance of the application by reducing the number of connections opened to the database. RDS proxy manages the connection pool and routes incoming connections to the available read replicas, which can help with connection management and reduce the number of connections that need to be opened and closed. About option D, moving the code for opening the database connection in the Lambda function outside of the event handler can help to improve the performance of the application by allowing the database connection to be reused across multiple requests. This avoids the need to open and close a new connection for each request, which can be time consuming and resource intensive. Question 5. A company is building a serverless application that runs on an AWS Lambda function that is attached to a VPC. The company needs to integrate the application with a new service from an external provider. The external provider supports only requests that come from public IPv4 addresses that are in an allow list. The company must provide a single public IP address to the external provider before the application can start using the new service. Which solution will give the application the ability to access the new service? The correct option is A. Deploy a NAT gateway, associate an elastic IP address with the NAT gateway, configure the VPC to use the NAT gateway. The solution will give the Lambda function access to the internet by routing its outbound traffic through the NAT gateway, which has a public elastic IP address. This will allow the external provider to whitelist the single public IP address associated with the NAT gateway and enable the application to access the new service. Question 6. A company hosts a Git repository in an on-premises data center. The company uses webhooks to invoke functionality that runs in the AWS cloud. The company hosts the webhook logic on a set of Amazon EC2 instances in an auto-scaling group that the company set as a target for an application load balancer. The Git server calls the ALB for the configured webhooks. The company wants to move the solution to a serverless architecture. Which solution will meet these requirements with the least operational overhead? The correct option is B. Create an Amazon API gateway, HTTP API. Implement each webhook logic in a separate AWS Lambda function. Update the Git servers to call the API gateway endpoint. This solution will provide low operational overhead as it utilizes the serverless capabilities of AWS Lambda and API Gateway, which automatically scales and manages the underlying infrastructure and resources. It also allows for the webhook logic to be easily managed and updated through the API Gateway interface. The answer should be B because it is the best solution in terms of operational overhead. Question 7. A company is using Amazon Open Search Service to analyze data. The company loads data into an Open Search Service cluster with 10 data nodes from an Amazon S3 bucket that uses S3 standard storage. The data resides in the cluster for 1 month for read-only analysis. After 1 month, the company deletes the index that contains the data from the cluster. For compliance purposes, the company must retain a copy of all input data. The company is concerned about ongoing costs and asks a solution architect to recommend a new solution. Which solution will meet these requirements most cost effectively? The correct option is B. Reduce the number of data nodes in the cluster to 2. Add ultra warm nodes to handle the expected capacity. Configure the indexes to transition to ultra warm when Open Search Service ingests the data. Transition the input data to S3 Glacier Deep archive after 1 month by using an S3 lifecycle policy. B is the most cost-effective solution as it reduces the number of data nodes in the cluster to 2 and adds ultra-warm nodes to handle the expected capacity. By configuring the indexes to transition to ultra-warm when Open Search Service ingests the data, the company can take advantage of the lower storage costs of ultra-warm. Additionally, by transitioning the input data to S3 Glacier Deep archive after 1 month, using an S3 lifecycle policy, the company can further reduce costs by using the lower storage costs of S3 Glacier Deep archive for long-term data retention. Question 8. A company recently deployed an application on AWS. The application uses Amazon DynamoDB. The company measured the application load and configured the RCUs and WCUs on the DynamoDB table to match the expected peak load. The peak load occurs once a week for a 4-hour period and is double the average load. The application load is close to the average load for the rest of the week. The access pattern includes many more writes than reads of the table. A solutions architect need to implement a solution to minimize the cost of the table. Which solution will meet these requirements? The correct option is A. Use AWS application autoscaling to increase capacity during the peak period. Purchase reserved RCUs and WCUs to match the average load. Since the peak period is only 4 hours a week and the application load is close to the average load for the rest of the week, it is not cost effective to configure on-demand capacity mode for the table. Instead, AWS application autoscaling can be used to increase the RCUs and WCUs during the peak period to meet the increased demand, and then decrease them to match the average load for the rest of the week. Additionally, reserved capacity can be purchased to match the average load, further reducing costs. Using DynamoDB accelerator in front of the table does not directly address the issue of cost optimization. Question 9. A company is hosting an image processing service on AWS in a VPC. The VPC extends across two availability zones. Each availability zone contains one public subnet and one private subnet. The service runs on Amazon EC2 instances in the private subnets. An application load balancer in the public subnets is in front of the service. The service needs to communicate with the internet and does so through two NAT gateways. The service uses Amazon S3 for image storage. The EC2 instances retrieve approximately 1 TB of data from an S3 bucket each day. The company has promoted the service as highly secure. A solutions architect must reduce cloud expenditures as much as possible without compromising the service's security posture or increasing the time spent on ongoing operations. Which solution will meet these requirements? The correct option is C. Set up an S3 gateway VPC endpoint in the VP attach and endpoint policy to the endpoint to allow the required actions on the S3 bucket. Setting up an S3 gateway VPC endpoint in the VPC and attaching an endpoint policy to the endpoint will allow the EC2 instances to securely access the S3 bucket for image storage without the need for NAT gateways, reducing costs without compromising security or increasing ongoing operations. This option reduces the costs associated with the NAT gateways and allows for faster data retrieval from the S3 bucket as traffic does not have to go through the internet gateway. Question 10. A company wants to migrate its workloads from on-premises to AWS. The workloads run on Linux and Windows. The company has a large on-premises infrastructure that consists of physical machines and VMs that host numerous applications. The company must capture details about the system configuration, system performance, running processes, and network connections of its on-premises workloads. The company also must divide the on-premises applications into groups for AWS migrations. The company needs recommendations for Amazon EC2 instance types so that the company can run its workloads on AWS in the most cost-effective manner. Which combination of steps should a solution architect take to meet these requirements? Choose 3. The correct options are A, D, and E, that is, assess the existing applications by installing AWS Application Discovery Agent on the physical machines and virtual machines. Group servers into applications for migration by using AWS Migration Hub, and generate recommended instance types and associated costs by using AWS Migration Hub. Question 11. A company is storing data on premises on a Windows file server. The company produces 5 GB of new data daily. The company migrated part of its Windows-based workload to AWS and needs the data to be available on a file system in the cloud. The company already has established an AWS Direct connection between the on-premises network and AWS. Which data migration strategy should the company use? The correct option is B. Use AWS Data Sync to schedule a daily task to replicate data between the on-premises Windows file server and Amazon FSx. B and D are both valid options. They both use data sync to schedule a daily task to replicate the data between on-premises and cloud. The main difference is the type of file system in the cloud, Amazon FSx or Amazon Elastic File System. Question 12. A company has created an OU in AWS organizations for each of its engineering teams. Each OU owns multiple AWS accounts. The organization has hundreds of AWS accounts. A solutions architect must design a solution so that each OU can view a breakdown of usage costs across its AWS accounts. Which solution meets these requirements? The correct option is B. Create an AWS cost and usage report from the AWS organization's management account. Allow each team to visualize the CUR through an Amazon QuickSight dashboard. B is the correct answer. The solution would be to create an AWS cost and usage report from the AWS organization's management account. This would allow the management account to view the usage costs across all the member accounts, and the teams can visualize the CUR through an Amazon QuickSight dashboard. This allows the organization to have a centralized place to view the cost breakdown and the teams to access the cost breakdown in an easy way. Question 13. A company is hosting a monolithic REST-based API for a mobile app on 5 Amazon EC2 instances in public subnets of a VPC. Mobile clients connect to the API by using a domain name that is hosted on Amazon Route 53. The company has created a Route 53 multi-value answer routing policy with the IP addresses of all the EC2 instances. Recently, the app has been overwhelmed by a large and sudden increase to traffic. The app has not been able to keep up with the traffic. Our solutions architect needs to implement a solution so that the app can handle the new and varying load. Which solution will meet these requirements with the least operational overhead? The correct option is A. Separate the API into individual AWS Lambda functions. Configure an Amazon API Gateway REST API with Lambda integration for the backend. Update the Route 53 record to point to the API Gateway API. Separate the API into individual AWS Lambda functions. Configure an Amazon API Gateway REST API with Lambda integration for the backend. Update the Route 53 record to point to the API Gateway API. Question 14. A company has registered 10 new domain names. The company uses the domains for online marketing. The company needs a solution that will redirect online visitors to a specific URL for each domain. All domains and target URLs are defined in a JSON document. All DNS records are managed by Amazon Route 53. Our solutions architect must implement a redirect service that accepts HTTP and HTTPS requests. Which combination of steps should the solutions architect take to meet these requirements with the least amount of operational effort? Choose 3. The correct options are C, E, and F. Create an AWS Lambda function that uses the JSON document in combination with the event message to look up and respond with a redirect URL. Create an Amazon CloudFront distribution. Deploy a email protected function. And create an SSL certificate by using AWS Certificate Manager. Include the domains as subject alternative names. About the options, C. By creating an AWS Lambda function, the solution architect can use the JSON document to look up the target URLs for each domain and respond with the appropriate redirect URL. This way, the solution does not need to rely on a web server to handle the redirects, which reduces operational effort. About E, by creating an Amazon CloudFront distribution, the solution architect can deploy a Lambda at Edge function that can look up the target URLs for each domain and respond with the appropriate redirect URL. This way, CloudFront can handle the redirection, which reduces operational effort. About option F, by creating an SSL certificate with ACM and including the domains as subject alternative names, the solution architect can ensure that the redirect service can handle both HTTP and HTTPS requests, which is required by the company. Question 15. A company is storing data in several Amazon Dynamo DB tables. A solutions architect must use a serverless architecture to make the data accessible publicly through a simple API over HTTPS. The solution must scale automatically in response to demand. Which solutions meet these requirements? The correct options are A and C. Create an Amazon API Gateway REST API. Configure this API with direct integrations to DynamoDB by using API Gateway's AWS integration type. And create an Amazon API Gateway HTTP API. Configure this API with integrations to AWS Lambda functions that return data from the DynamoDB tables. A and C API Gateway REST API can invoke DynamoDB directly. Question 16. A software company has deployed an application that consumes a REST API by using Amazon API Gateway, AWS Lambda functions, and an Amazon DynamoDB table. The application is showing an increase in the number of errors during put requests. Most of the put calls come from a small number of clients that are authenticated with specific API keys. A solutions architect has identified that a large number of the put requests originate from one client. The API is non-critical and clients can tolerate retries of unsuccessful calls. However, the errors are displayed to customers and are causing damage to the API's reputation. What should the solution architect recommend to improve the customer experience? The correct option is B. Implement API throttling through a usage plan at the API gateway level. Ensure that the client application handles code 429 replies without error. API throttling is a technique that can be used to control the rate of requests to an API. This can be useful in situations where a small number of clients are making a large number of requests, which is causing errors. By implementing API throttling through a usage plan at the API gateway level, the solutions architect can limit the number of requests that a client can make, which will help to reduce the number of errors. It is important that the client application handles the code 429 replies without error. This will help to improve the customer experience by reducing the number of errors that are displayed to customers. Additionally, it will prevent the API's reputation from being damaged by the errors. Question 17. A company has a web application that allows users to upload short videos. The videos are stored on Amazon EBS volumes and analyzed by custom recognition software for categorization. The website contains static content that has variable traffic with peaks in certain months. The architecture consists of Amazon EC2 instances running in an auto-scaling group for the web application and EC2 instances running in an auto-scaling group to process an Amazon SQS queue. The company wants to re-architect the application to reduce operational overhead using AWS managed services where possible and remove dependencies on third-party software. Which solution meets these requirements? The correct option is C. Host the web application in Amazon S3. Store the uploaded videos in Amazon S3. Use S3 event notification to publish events to the SQS queue. Process the SQS queue with an AWS Lambda function that calls the Amazon Recognition API to categorize the videos. This solution eliminates the need for managing and scaling EC2 instances for the web application and the worker environment for processing the SQS queue. Instead, Amazon S3 can host the web application and store the uploaded videos, which can trigger S3 event notifications to send messages to the SQS queue. Then an AWS Lambda function can process the message in the SQS queue and use Amazon Recognition API to categorize the videos. This approach also takes advantage of AWS managed services such as S3, SQS, and Lambda, which reduces operational overhead and dependency on third-party software. Question 18. A company used Amazon EC2 instances to deploy a web fleet to host a blog site. The EC2 instances are behind an application load balancer and are configured in an auto-scaling group. The web application stores all blog content on an Amazon EFS volume. The company recently added a feature for bloggers to add a video to their post, attracting 10 times the previous user traffic. At peak times of the day, users report buffering and timeout issues while attempting to reach the site or watch videos, which is the most cost efficient and scalable deployment that will resolve the issue for users. The correct option is C. Configure an Amazon CloudFront distribution, point the distribution to an S3 bucket, and migrate the videos from AFS to Amazon S3. Amazon CloudFront is a content delivery network that can be used to deliver content to users with low latency and high data transfer speeds. By configuring a CloudFront distribution for the blog site, pointing it at an S3 bucket, the videos can be cached at edge locations closer to users, reducing buffering and timeout issues. Additionally, S3 is designed for scalable storage and can handle high levels of user traffic. Migrating the videos from AFS to S3 would also improve the performance and scalability of the website. Question 19. A company is using multiple AWS accounts. The DNS records are stored in a private hosted zone for Amazon Route 53 in account A. The company's applications and databases are running in account B. A solutions architect will deploy a two-tier application in a new VPC. To simplify the configuration, the db.example.com CNAME record set for the Amazon RDS endpoint was created in a private hosted zone for Amazon Route 53. During deployment, the application failed to start. Troubleshooting revealed that db.example.com is not resolvable on the Amazon EC2 instance. The solutions architect confirmed that the record set was created correctly in Route 53. Which combination of steps should the solutions architect take to resolve this issue? The correct options are C and E. Create an authorization to associate the private hosted zone in account A with the new VPC in account B, and associate a new VPC in account B with a hosted zone in account A. Delete the association authorization in account A. C and E are correct. About the options: C. Create an authentication to associate the private hosted zone in account A with the new VPC in account B. This step is necessary because the VPC in account B needs to be associated with the private hosted zone in account A to be able to resolve the DNS records. About option E, associate a new VPC in account B with the hosted zone in account A. Delete the association authorization in account A. This step is necessary because the association authorization needs to be removed in account A after the association is done in account B. Question 20. A company needs to implement a patching process for its servers. The on-premises servers and Amazon EC2 instances use a variety of tools to perform patching. Management requires a single report showing the patch status of all the servers and instances. Which set of actions should a solution architect take to meet these requirements? The correct option is A. Use AWS Systems Manager to manage patches on the on-premises servers and EC2 instances. Use Systems Manager to generate patch compliance reports. A is correct. AWS Systems Manager can manage patches on both on-premises servers and EC2 instances and can generate patch compliance reports. AWS OpsWorks and Amazon Inspector are not specifically designed for patch management and therefore would not be the best choice for this use case. Using Amazon Event Bridge rule and AWS X-Ray to generate patch compliance reports is not a practical solution as they are not designed for patch management reporting.